On today's episode, we have our Week 8 QB, tight end, and defense rankings. No buys this week, just elite vibes. This is the first ever time that we are ranking quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses. I'm a brave man for ranking defenses, Aiden. I can't believe I went through that exercise today, but
that was nice.
I came out on the other end feeling pretty good. I feel pretty good about this week, and I'm ready to talk about it. How are you feeling? You ready to go? You ready to talk Week 8 tight ends, QBs, and defenses, man?
I'm fired up, man. They all deserve love too, man. Onesie positions, they're not as sexy, but they're still helping you win games, helping you win championships. So it would be malpractice if we didn't at least help you out a little bit here.
And we don't do malpractice on the Regression to the Mean podcast. But before we dive into the rankings, we want to thank you. Seriously. Thank you for supporting the Regression to the Mean podcast. Thank you for being as psycho about fantasy football as me, Keegan, and Aiden are, and we appreciate you for listening and being a part of the Mean team. If you haven't had the chance, we'd appreciate it if you could go ahead, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and drop any of your questions in the comments below. Aiden, we are marching towards our goal of 1,000 subscribers before the end of the season, and we need you to tag along. We need you. It's just, there's only one way that we can get to 1,000. It's if you hit that subscribe button, and guess what? It's completely free. So you know what to do. Right, Aiden?
People know
what
the
to do, right?
You know the deal.
Yeah,
it's only going to get better from here.
All right. You want to do this? You want to start with quarterbacks?
Let's do it, man. QBs.
Let's do this. Okay, so I'm pulling up the rankings list here, starting over here at quarterback. So I think the top four are pretty locked and loaded rest of season, in my opinion. At QB1, Jalen Hurts. QB2, Lamar Jackson. QB3, Josh Allen. QB4, Patrick Mahomes. I think week in and week out, you're just going to see that tier kind of change week in and week out. I'd say the biggest guy that I have in terms of discrepancy versus expert consensus rankings is Lamar Jackson this week in this tier. I have him up 2 spots from QB4 to QB2. So Arizona surrendered the 7th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the past month. Lamar is second in the league in fantasy points per dropback this season, only behind our sweet Prince Anthony Richardson. Get well. We miss you, A-Rich.
We miss you.
It's hard to find a QB with a higher week-to-week ceiling than Lamar. So that's my big riser in this tier, and I guess my faller because of it is Patrick Mahomes. This is nothing against Mahomes. He's coming off the best week of the year. The fear is that the Chiefs go run heavy. They play at a slower pace, and I don't know. Just it might lead to a 20-point day versus a 30-point day, right? So it's nice to see Rashee Rice as a bona fide number 2 emerge. It makes it a lot easier to see Mahomes hit his weekly ceiling. So I'll pause there. Any thoughts on the first tier, or you just want to jump to the second tier?
Yeah, I was just going to say I love Mahomes. I think he's starting to heat up and has an awesome matchup. Ooh. The Denver defense is the 3rd worst passing defense in the league. So, yeah, to your point, he only had about 18 points in their first matchup just a couple weeks ago. I'd be shocked if we're not at least in the mid-20s pushing for QB1 this week. So, no, it feels like Patrick Mahomes is kind of like Derrick Henry in the sense like he kind of gets better as the year goes on a lot of times is what we've seen in fantasy football. And last week may have kind of woke the beast in terms of kind of getting those nuclear week over week. So, no, I'm pretty high on Mahomes this week.
Love it. Our Scott Fishbowl team would love Mahomes to go
would be huge.
To go Oppenheimer. Okay, the next tier we have here is QBs 5 to, I'd say 7. I have Justin Herbert as QB5, Jared Goff is QB6, and Tua is QB7. Nothing really crazy here. I've just flipped Goff and Tua. The Lions are playing at home. They've got a 27-point implied team total. Goff's just a different animal at home versus the road.
It's ridiculous.
It's just a different animal. So, and then Tua scored 12 points on the road against New England in week 2. He struggled to really go crazy in fantasy against Bill Belichick in his 2 matchups that he's had with Mike McDaniel as his head coach. However, Miami has a 28-point implied total. And they're playing at home. He's QB5 on the season. It's not like I'm getting disrespectful to Tua. I don't. We'll see. Let's see Tua have a big week. But yeah, any discrepancy on those 3 guys? Anything you want to call out there?
Yeah, I'd say with Tua, just keep an eye on the injury report with his guys. It's kind of pointing towards the direction that everyone's going to play. But obviously, if you're without Tyreek and or Waddle, it makes it a bit tougher with his receiving core. So if that was the case, maybe they lean towards a more heavy run approach. I don't know, but no, I like the order that these are in. Goff, as you mentioned too, is like I don't know what gets into him at Ford Field, but like the dude just turned into an absolute maniac. It's just like 300 yards guaranteed. He just goes nuclear every single time.
Next tier I have here is QBs 8 through 12. So I've got CJ Stroud here at QB 8. I've got Kirk Cousins at QB 9, Trevor Lawrence at QB 10, Dak Prescott is QB 11, and Joe Burrow at QB 12. So I've got two big movers in this range. I've got Kirk Cousins 3 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings, and I have Dak Prescott 5 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. So my thoughts here on Kirk, this is purely as a 49er fan who watched him have an out-of-body experience at home in prime time against a very good defense. I don't care that Green Bay's given up the 7th fewest fantasy points to QBs over the last month. I don't care that Green Bay's defense is a run funnel. After what Kirk did last week against the Niners, he's just going to be a top 10 play for the next couple weeks for me. It's just auto. I know that you probably want more hard-hitting facts listeners and mean team members, but that's just the truth here. It also helps that the Packers probably won't have Jair Alexander, and the fact that the Vikings O-line is legit mauling people right now. So I've got Cousins as a big riser, and then Prescott, 5 spot up the ranks. This has more to do with coming out of the bye and the fact that the Rams have given up the 5th most points to opposing quarterbacks over the past month. I just feel like the Cowboys are going to have to turn it up a notch on offense, and I feel like this bye week came at the perfect time for them. And Dak had a nice rushing performance against the Chargers coming out before they took the week off. So Cowboys have a 26-point implied team total. I just think this is a good spot for Dak. So I'll pause there. Any thoughts on Kirk or Dak before you share your thoughts on this tier?
Yeah, I want to just touch on all 3 guys that are coming off bye. Starting with CJ, I'd personally move him down a bit. Okay. Weeks 2 through 4, we saw really bright performances. He cleared 20 all 3 of those weeks, followed up by 2 not bad performances by any means, but was right around 14 to 15 points. Maybe people have a bit more tape on him. You know, offensive line is obviously banged up. Tank Dell was banged up too. So I would personally move him down a bit. Like, I'd rather have both Burrow and Prescott coming off a bye. I think those are more established guys, and I like those matchups. Carolina, as we know, actually they've been decent against the pass this year too. So I think that could be a tougher matchup for him. I don't know. I think like that one's just more of a question mark to me. Whereas Burrow and Prescott coming off of a bye, it's like more established guys. They've been doing this for a while. I'd personally probably rather have those 2 guys. But this is a fun tier. I like all these guys, but it's really hard to rank, which one I'd rather have. But
yeah, I ranked CJ a little bit more aggressively. Yep. I just think there's a couple of things here. 1, coming out of the bye week is huge. 2, they have Tank Dell back, so they're going to have their full complement of pass catchers. Looks like Laramie Tunsil is going to play, and their O-line's healthier. 2 things going against Stroud. Carolina's been decent against quarterbacks. Carolina's been terrible against running backs, right? So it's kind of like they have a run funnel set up and running backs feast. The thing that I have to move Stroud up my rankings for, it has nothing to do with stats. It has everything to do with the fact that he's got that dog in him, and he's facing the team that passed him at 1.
That's also true.
You can't sleep on that.
Yep.
I know that sounds dumb, but
it's real.
And I took this personally, meme.
It's like Lamar roasting the Lions and every other team that publicly, pass on him. It's like these players are very, very much human, as much as we just think of them as our little players in our fun game. Like, these are real ass players. And to his point, that's a great shout there.
Yeah. So it's something to keep in mind. So I have a decision to make between Stroud and Joe Burrow. It's a lot easier when you're in a spreadsheet ranking it versus like when you're in the sleeper app and one's got 2 more projected points than the other, right? So maybe I'll adjust these rankings a little bit as we go. But the final tier that I have here at quarterback, it's rough, but there's some options. I've got Jordan Love is QB 13, Sam Howell is QB 14, Desmond Ridder is QB 15, and Russell Wilson is QB 16. So 2 guys that I have in this range that are much higher than expert consensus ranking has are Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder. I have them each 3 spots above. So Howell is the QB 7 on a point per game basis over the past month. He looked great against the Eagles a few weeks ago, but his inability to get the ball out of it, like his hand, and get sacked, it makes him such a risky start. But I don't know, dude. He's been pretty nice. And then Desmond Ridder. So Ridder is actually the QB9 on a point per game basis over the past 4 weeks. His rushing production creates a safe floor. If he didn't have like 8 turnovers over the past 2 games, he'd probably be like QB5. I don't know, though, the low point total in this game, they're both implied like 16, 17 points. It's like one of the more shockingly low over-unders. I think it's like a 35-point total. So I don't know if I want to start the quarterback going in that matchup, to be honest. It doesn't look like it'll be a friendly fantasy matchup. So that's it for the final tier here. Yeah. Any thoughts before we jump to tight ends?
Yeah, I've got 2. If there's anyone I would definitely like to have here, it's Sam Howell. That Philly pass defense we've seen all year is pretty susceptible. He can take sacks. I don't think that really affects his
point total. Yeah, as long as he doesn't fumble.
Yeah,
right?
Like as long as you're not getting strip sacked, I'm fine with that, man. I think he took 5 sacks the last time against them. Still got to 19 points, so that's fine. Jordan Love, I'm good off of. I would probably rather. I think the only person I maybe wouldn't put him behind would be Russell Wilson because he's awful too. Jordan Love is averaging like 14 points over his last 3 games. I think NFL teams have kind of figured out what he's good and what he's not good at and just hasn't been very sharp. So
that O-line, dude, their O-line's been brutal since Bakhtiari got hurt.
Yeah.
Have you seen the splits since their O-line got injured? It's like Love was like lighting it up, and then since Bakhtiari's been out, it's been rough.
I'm fully good off of Jordan Love. The skill position players aren't playing very well. The line's not playing very well. Defense isn't as good as it's been. I don't know. If you're starting Jordan Love over like a guy like Sam Howell, that's a bad mistake.
Yeah, I think the only saving grace for Jordan Love right now is the fact that he's rushed for over 20-plus yards or more out of 4 out of 6 games.
Yeah, that's fair.
He's got some production with his legs.
Yeah.
And he throws touchdowns. I don't know. That offense is slow. Oh, it moves way too slow. But those are the rankings for quarterbacks here. Just the top 16 this week, so I'm sorry for the Superflex crowd. Maybe, in a couple weeks, 3 weeks, we'll have more, but shoot me any questions if you got any questions shoot me any comments if you have questions on any quarterbacks that aren't ranked here. We're always here to help. And then again, these rankings are in the show notes. Moving on to tight ends here, Aidan. So it's a pretty good group of tight ends. I'm not going to lie. We have no tight ends on a bye this week. I was going through all this, and I say that every time I say this, tight ends then have historically like the worst games ever. But just looking through this tier of tight ends here, tier 1 is Travis Kelce. He lives in a tier of his own, in my opinion. Travis Kelce's averaging 20 fantasy points per game this year at the age of 34. He's tight end Jerry Rice, dude. It's remarkable what this guy's doing. And he's dating the most famous woman in America. So good for you, Travis Kelce. You got to tip your cap to that. In their own separate tiers here, and this is where I debated a bit, and I went back and forth. But I've got 3 guys in this tier. I've got Mark Andrews, I've got TJ Hockensen, and I've got Darren Waller as my tight end 4. The only guy here that's really kind of breaking any news or, going against the mold is Darren Waller. I've got him 4 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. So Waller has the 3rd most receiving yards of any tight end this year, and he has the 3rd highest target rate. He's 2nd in first read target share, and he faces off against a Jets secondary that has given up the 7th most points to tight ends over the past month and the 2nd most fantasy points to tight ends this season. He looks like a different guy with Tyrod Taylor.
That's what I was going to say once you got to me.
And I will say this. The Giants have installed, I think his name's Glauan. Basically, this guy came off that was supposed to be a starter on their O-line, got benched, and now he's starting again. Glauanowski. Oh, dude, this is brutal. I'm going to get flamed in the comments here. This guy who's got a crazy long name is now anchored their offensive line. And I'm going to pull this up here. Mark Glauanowski, Giants. Let's see. His name is Mark Glowinski. I don't know. Number 64 for the Giants. He's came in and he's really stabilized this offensive line. I shared this here in our group chat a little bit earlier on. Aidan. Yep. It was like Tyrod has 2.4 seconds to throw, where Daniel Jones had like 2.2, and it went from like 32nd to 20th.
Yeah.
So They've gone from being by far and away the worst O-line in football to being bad, which is a huge upgrade in
That's
the
better.
O-line
That's
world.
progress.
Yeah. And now Darren Waller doesn't have to block. So Waller's crushed it over the past 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this tier, Kelce tier, these top four? Anyone that you'd move in and out?
No, I like the tier. I was gonna shout Waller too. Over his last 3 games, is like finally kind of came to life. 11 targets, 7 targets, 8 targets. 10 plus, and all. He had 9.3 in one of them. But like, it feels like we're getting closer to kind of what we all had anticipated of him. I hope it keeps up once Daniel Jones likely returning next week. It'd be such a bummer if we made all this progress with Stroud and then he just zaps it. But yeah, like the top 3 are pretty unmovable. You can't really make an argument to put anyone ahead of those 3. It's very challenging.
Yeah, Waller's the tight end 5 on the season. So a lot of people were victory lapping Waller's slow start. He's kind of been exactly as advertised.
He's been great.
Which has been pretty cool.
Yeah.
The next tier I have here, I have George Kittle, Sam Laporta, Dallas Goedert, and Evan Ingram. So George Kittle, tight end 5, Laporta, tight end 6, Dallas Goedert, tight end 7, Evan Ingram, tight end 8. So George Kittle, I know like he seems risky, high risk, high reward. Well, when Debo doesn't play or Ayuk doesn't play, Kittle's an easy top 5 start. So last week versus the Vikings, he saw a top 5 target rate, team yard share, and first read target rate as a tight end. Sam Laporta here, I've got him down 2 spots against expert consensus rankings. And the only reason I'm doing that is because Laporta's been highly efficient with his touches, and he's been dominant for stretches this year. But he's really only like top 10, top 12 in target rate, target share. Like he doesn't get a ton of volume. He's just been super efficient. So he's going off against a Raiders defense that has surrendered, I think, like 7 fantasy points per game to tight ends over the past month. Like Cole Kmet had 0 points against the Raiders last week. So that's really my big faller. And I guess I have Evan Ingram down 2 spots. And my only comment here is Evan Ingram has finished top 12 in 5 out of 6 games this season. He's finished top 7 in 4 out of 6 in terms of tight end finishes in PPR. He's super consistent. But if George Kittle's the primary target and Darren Waller is moving up the ranks, it just means Evan Ingram has got to move down, in my opinion. So Evan Ingram and Sam Laporta are my 2 fallers that I have, and that's what happens when you move Darren Waller up 4 spots, right? So any thoughts on this tier of Kittle, Laporta, Goddard, and Ingram?
Yeah, I want to touch on 2 guys real fast. I want to touch on Dallas Goedert first, who kind of similar to Waller has really turned it on. Over the first 4 games of the season, he had about 5.5 points per game and 0 touchdowns. Over his last 3, he's up to 17.8 points per game and 2 touchdowns. It feels like as Jalen Hurts has gotten more comfortable in this offense and kind of settled in, so has Dallas Goedert, which is pretty exciting. He didn't do much in the first matchup against Washington. He caught 2 of his 4 targets for just 25 yards, so that was kind of a stinker during his first couple weeks. But I'm expecting a big game from Dallas. I wouldn't be shocked if he's in double digits again. Evan Ingram is one that I have trouble with this week. I don't know what the return of Zay Jones means for this offense. As you mentioned, like Evan Ingram has had a pretty awesome role. He's seen either 7 or 8 targets every week since week 2. So like it's been super steady, super consistent. Does Zay Jones potentially knock him to the number 4 pass catcher in that offense? I don't know. I don't really know what Zay Jones means for this offense. It could mean Kirk gets less, maybe Ridley gets less. I don't know, but I know they're going to get Zay Jones involved again. And I'm not sure who's going to take a hit. So like, the question mark out of anyone I'm putting next to Evan Ingram. I like this tier as a whole, but I don't know. I could see Evan Ingram, dipping to closer to 4 to 5 targets as Zay Jones kind of carves out a slice from everyone. Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, this is another good tier. It's once you kind of get beyond here, is when you're like, okay, I guess here goes nothing at the tight end position.
Yeah, the next tier that I have is at tight end 9, Dalton Kincaid. Tight end 10, Jake Ferguson. Tight end 11, Dalton Schultz. So Kincaid already played. We're recording this Friday, but I just want to shout him out. I think he could easily jump into this tier above him weekly if his role continues to expand like it has. This was Aiden's big call on the waiver wire episode. Shout out, Aiden. You're eating a gourmet ice cream. Milk
Yummy.
was a fantastic choice. It's me, Ronnie.
It's me, Ronnie.
Great. Great choice there. But I think he's a locked and loaded tight end 1 in a high-powered offense. I've got Jake Ferguson here at tight end 10, 2 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. The Rams have given up the second most points per game to tight ends over the past month. Dak loves Ferguson, and his usage remains fantastic. So I think you get him in your lineup. A little down on Dalton Schultz this week. Just, he's been awesome, but, we've got Tank Dell back in the equation. Curious to know how that works. So that's my tier here of just Kincaid, Jake Ferguson, Dalton Schultz. Any arguments there? Don't you see how Kincaid could just jump in the other one, and then Ferguson and Schultz are kind of their own tier?
I think it's just like volume. Like he had 8 targets last week, caught all of them. Had 7 targets last night and caught 5 or 6 of them. Found pay dirt for the first time. Yeah, it just feels like it's really about like volume. I feel like as you kind of go down from tier 1, 2, 3, it's like Dalton Schultz and Jake Ferguson probably need a touchdown to hit home. Whereas, guys like Evan Ingram and Dalton Kincaid, which is kind of why you mentioned, could probably be in the same tier. Like they're probably getting closer to, 5, 6, 7, 8 targets. So it's like
design looks too. Like first 3 targets, like the offense, like the ball goes to them on purpose. And I think Ferguson and Schultz are just like tight ends tied to good quarterbacks that'll probably throw them the ball in the end zone.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I approach it with the two of them.
Yeah. So no, I like that a lot. I think Kincaid could easily be in that next tier going forward.
In a tier of his own, tight end 12. There's no one like him. In a tier of his own is Kyle Pitts. He would easily be a top 5 play if he wasn't splitting reps with Jonnu Smith. If you combine Smith and Pitts' production, they're by far and away the tight end 1 this year.
It's not even close.
Insane. This came to my attention. I was listening to the Establish the Run podcast with Evan Silva and Adam Levitan, and they were saying that Kyle Pitts ran most of his routes last week outside versus quarterbacks. So they had Jonnu play in line and in the slot, and they put Kyle Pitts out there against cornerbacks. And it's really cool that you have a tight end that can do that, but that doesn't seem like the best use of his talents, right? Wouldn't you just want to have Kyle Pitts match up against safeties
and linebackers?
And linebackers?
Yeah.
That is some galaxy brain shit from Arthur Smith. I again, like, Tennessee's been super stingy to tight ends this year, but if Pitts is basically playing wide receiver, they've actually been kind of bad against wide receivers. So it's just really hard to rank this guy. He's super talented. He looks great. Like, he had 3 catches for 50 yards last week. He looks really good right now. I don't understand how to. I don't know, man. I don't think we're gonna ever figure out Kyle until he doesn't.
Never. And I could not be happier that I have 0 ownership of him, because every week I watch him, I'm just like, it's not supposed to be like this. Like, this could have been so special. Like, we are just witnessing just one of the most misused people I can remember in recent memory in the last half decade. It's absolutely puzzling. So yeah, Kyle Pitts is definitely a tier of his own.
The 49ers took Vernon Davis in the 2005 draft. They took him, I think, 5th or 6th overall. One of the highest tight end picks ever. It took him 4 or 5 years before he dominated, and then when he got up, he dominated. He didn't have a Hall of Fame career because his peak was only 3 or 4 years, but that kind of seems the route it's going to go for Pitts, in my opinion, which is sad. I wish we could.
We need to fire Arthur Smith, and then someone will be like, oh.
Just make it.
Why
just
don't I
play him
use
at
it?
tight end.
Yeah.
Just play him like Jimmy Graham. I don't get it. I don't get it, dude. The final tier that I have here is tight end 13, 14, and 15, and 16. The 16th one should probably be in a tier of its own. Maybe we put him and Kyle in their own tier because they're so unique. But tight end 13 is Gerald Everett. Tight end 14, I have Cole Kmet. Tight end 15, Michael Mayer. All these guys are big risers for me. All 3 to 4 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. I'd actually have Gerald Everett in the same tier as Jake Ferguson and Dalton Schultz. He's injured this week, though.
Yeah.
It was a quad that then got classified as a hip. He just got in a limited practice, but he scored double-digit fantasy points in back-to-back games. He's become the clear number 3 target in this offense, and now Josh Palmer's not practicing. So, I don't know. The Bears have given up 12 fantasy points per game to tight ends over the past month. He's a fringe tight end 1 play if he's healthy. And then this isn't pandering to our guy Aidan here, but I've got Cole Kmet up relatively high. So the Chargers defense have given up the 9th most points per game to tight ends over the past month. Kmet did not register a single target last week. He's got a rebound, right? And then I didn't list off tight end 16 again because I had tight end 15 Michael Mayer, and the tight end 16 is Taysom Hill. So Taysom 3 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings Indy has surrendered the 8th most points to tight ends and has gotten gashed on the ground this year. I think they've given up the most points to running backs over the past 4 weeks. Taysom's seen 5+ targets in back-to-back games along with his red zone package. He's a great streamer this week.
He's so annoying. He's annoying.
A great streamer this week. But that's the final tier. Any thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, not much. The Cole Kmet one, I wouldn't expect a huge rebound personally. I just think like Bajan's going to continue to be like a first read, second read guy, and Cole Kmet outside of like the red zone and inside the 10 likely isn't going to be your first or second read on plays that he's dialing up. But who knows? Super talented guy, and the Chargers defense is, to put it nicely,
beatable. Just
not very good. Yeah, beatable is a good way to put it. So this is a tier with a ton of upside. Then you got Taysom's almost his own tier too, because he throws it, he runs it, and he's checking like all the different boxes on your sleeper app, and it's just like look at him go.
Like if you're hurting for tight end and the guy you're playing is projected to beat you by 10+ points or more, come on, like Taysom is a perfect lottery
for sure.
Yeah, like but if you're projected to win and you have like David Njoku, probably just roll David Njoku out there.
Yeah.
But I like Taysom's ceiling more than a lot of those other guys, and the tight end, it's a good place to chase ceiling.
Yeah.
Really, really quickly before we get out of here, for defenses, this is the first time I've ever talked about defenses like this on this show. I have in the tier of their own here, I've got Kansas City Chiefs at 1, I've got the Eagles at 2, and I've got the Jets at 3, and the Ravens at 4. The Kansas City Chiefs are the big mover here. I've got them 4 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. The Broncos have a 20-point implied team total. I'm not buying it. KC's defense has been one of the best units in football. The Broncos scored a whopping 8 points in Week 6 against the Chiefs, and Russ was sacked 4 times. Again, the Eagles are going to be popular as the number 1 defense this week. I just got the Chiefs ahead of them. So I could stop there. And the Ravens are a great matchup too. Do you have any thoughts on these top 4 defenses?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm back and forth with the Philly defense again. Like this comes down to like they're going to give up points this week, but because of Sam Howell, like they only had 5 points in fantasy against them last time, and again, like they sacked Sam Howell 5 times. So like I just see a similar performance where they're probably going to give up 21, 24 points. Probably going to have a half dozen sacks. You probably need like a touchdown or a handful of turnovers to finish his defense too for me. But like, yeah, like the opportunity is pretty awesome. So I don't know. I'd move down a little, but at that point, that's just being nitpicky.
Next tier of defenses I have at defense number 5, I've got the Cowboys. Defense number 6, the Seahawks. Defense number 7, the Lions. Defense number 8, the Browns. Defense number 9, the Falcons. I have 2 very big movers here in this tier. I've got the Seahawks 6 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings, and I have the Falcons 5 spots ahead. So the Seahawks are facing the Browns. The Browns have a 17-point implied team total. PJ Walker has thrown 3 interceptions, 0 touchdowns, and has completed 50% of his passes since taking over for Deshaun Watson. Over the past 3 games, the Seahawks have surrendered 8 points per game to opposing offenses. That's a pretty good spot to be in. I don't know. How are they at 12? That makes no sense. It feels divorced from reality. They're one of the top defenses right now in fantasy going.
Yeah.
And then the Falcons here, 5 spots ahead of an expert consensus ranking. So the Titans have a 16.5-point implied team total. 16 points. Will Levis is starting for this team. # Mayo Boy. And the Falcons defense has been super stingy like all season long. This is a low-scoring environment. Rookie QBs make mistakes. The Falcons don't get a ton of sacks. They don't turn the ball over a ton, but they do just enough to make them a great streamer this week. So those are kind of my 2 favorite streamers in play here. I think the Seahawks defense after this week might just be like a permanent starter. But what are your thoughts here at the 2 in this tier?
Yeah, I think the Seahawks shout to start with is really strong. Yeah, they're number 5 on the year, playing against a PJ Walker that is rather shaky. You've got Jerome Ford banged up too. I think they're an easy dart throw for defense number 1 on the week. They've already had 2 defensive touchdowns and a handful of turnovers. Like again, to your point, I think this defense is a lot better than it showed in like that first week or two where they got absolutely toasted. So pretty good. And then, yeah, obviously, like I'm just going to go with the other rookie QB matchup. The Falcons going against Will Levis and probably some combination of Malik Willis too. I would assume we're going to see both quarterbacks this Sunday, which again, that's pretty favorable. Neither one is anything to really be all that scared of. So no, I think those are two really good shouts there.
The third tier, I've got the Bills at 10, the Niners at 11, the Saints at 12, the Chargers at 13, the Dolphins at 14, and the Giants at 15. I've got the Niners, Saints, and Chargers all down 2 spots versus expert consensus rankings. I think they're all in good spots, though. Like, I would not be shocked if the Niners, Saints, or Chargers all had really nice weeks. The Bengals have a 20-point implied total against the Niners. The 49ers are second in the league in takeaways, but they're bottom 5 in sacks. I'm a big Niners fan. As you know, if you follow this podcast, there's a lot of talk about this defensive line, having a huge comeback game after kind of getting embarrassed by Kirk Cousins on primetime. I don't know. Maybe I'm just the homerism in my head is just thinking about Nick Bosa and Fred Warner against, Joe Burrow, but Burrow's healthy. I don't know. It's just a tough spot. You're going to start him, right, if you have the Niners defense. And then the Colts offense against the Saints, they have a 21-point implied team total, which makes sense. The Colts are the only team in the league that scored 20-plus points in every game this year. But over his past 2 games, Gardner Minshew has thrown 4 interceptions, and he's taken 7 sacks. So it's a pretty good spot for the Saints. What do you think on this final tier?
Yeah, I think these all fit in nicely in terms of like I probably wouldn't move any of these around. I think the Saints defense has been a little less productive in terms of fantasy than I think we were all kind of predicting. Like their schedule, like when we looked at it week 1, looked like it was going to, be an absolute cakewalk for them. And, their defense 12, they've still been fine. They've given some good fantasy output. But, yeah, they haven't quite lived up to how I personally expected them to be for fantasy. I thought this was like a set and forget for the first 8 or 9 weeks when I was looking at their QB matchups. So now this is a good tier. You're starting most of those pretty confidently.
One to keep an eye on is the Giants. So the Giants defense has played a lot better lately, and the Jets have a 20-point implied team total. That's probably a defense that's on the waiver wire right now, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're looking at a defense that you really don't want to start and don't feel good about, the Giants are probably staring you on the wire. They're a really decent dart throw this week. I know Zach Wilson's played better, but I mean, I don't know. He's still Zach Wilson, so.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. At that point, yeah, we're at defense 15. It's like you're just hoping, but Zach Wilson isn't the strongest QB, so it's it's a fair dart though.
But that's the whole week, dude. That is the whole week. We have ranked pretty much every position. Well, we ranked every position outside of kicker, and we've talked through a lot of people. I'm pretty excited. You think the Bears are going to win on Sunday night?
We'll see. I hope so. I don't know. I feel like the line is far too high. If I was a gambling man, I would take the points. The Chargers really haven't been all that good. Our defense is playing a lot better, and Bajan looked pretty competent in that offense. So 9-10 points on the road. Yeah, I would probably take those points. We'll see. I think it's going to be a lot closer than the line suggests.
However, some knowledge has come to my attention that the Bears have been good at stopping the run to running backs, but they've actually given up a ton of receptions to running backs. It's come to my attention. Also, it's come to my attention Josh Palmer's banged up. Gerald Everett's banged up. This might be the week, folks.
Austin Eckler might be back.
We might actually see
or maybe it's
good
QJ.
Austin Eckler week.
Maybe it's QJ.
This is the Austin Eckler week, folks. Oh my God, I love how everything is. The C's are just parting for QJ. Like everything is parting.
Please, just hit home, man.
Nothing.
Show up.
Nothing. All right, Aidan, you have a great weekend. Thank you, as always, for sharing your thoughts. As you know, we're going to be dropping our Sunday recap episode. We're actually going to be doing an awards ceremony for the halfway point of the year. We are now halfway through the year. If there are relevant things that happen on Sunday, of course, they will be spoken about. But that's right. We are giving out fantasy Jalen Milk was a bad choice awards for the entire half of this season. So we're juiced, and we got more coming your way as well. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Until next time.